Danny had always hated basements. As a child, his imagination conjured monsters lurking in the shadows, waiting to pounce. The fear lingered into adulthood, though he did his best to suppress it. So when he inherited his grandmother's old house, complete with a large, dark basement, he felt a shiver of dread mixed with the grief of her passing. The house was located on the outskirts of town, a grand Victorian structure that had seen better days. The exterior was weather-worn, the paint peeling and the windows coated with dust. Inside, it was a time capsule, filled with antique furniture and the musty scent of age. Danny hadn't visited his grandmother often in recent years, busy with his own life, but he remembered the house vividly, especially the basement door, always locked, always ominous. After the funeral, Danny decided to spend a few days at the house to sort through his grandmother's belongings. It was a way to say goodbye, to connect with the memories of a simpler time. On his second day there, while exploring the rooms and reminiscing, he found the key to the basement in an old jewelry box on his grandmother's dresser. His hand trembled as he inserted the key into the lock. The door creaked open, releasing a gust of cold, stale air. Danny switched on a light, a single bare bulb that barely illuminated the space. Shadows danced on the stone walls as he descended the wooden stairs, each step echoing in the silence. The basement was cluttered with decades of forgotten items. Old furniture, dusty boxes, and covered paintings were strewn about haphazardly. As Danny navigated through the maze of objects, something caught his eye. In the far corner, partially hidden by a stack of crates, was a door he had never noticed before. It was an ordinary-looking door, yet it filled him with an inexplicable sense of unease. His grandmother had never mentioned another room in the basement. Curiosity battled with apprehension as he approached it. He hesitated, hand hovering over the doorknob, before finally giving in to his curiosity. The door creaked open, revealing a narrow hallway, dimly lit by a flickering overhead light. The air was colder here, almost freezing, and carried a faint metallic odor. Danny's heart pounded as he stepped inside. The hallway seemed to stretch further than the dimensions of the house should allow. As he walked, the sound of his footsteps seemed to be swallowed by the oppressive silence. The hallway ended in another door, this one made of heavy, reinforced steel. A padlock secured it, and Danny felt a surge of frustration. What was so important that it needed to be locked away so securely? Determined to uncover the mystery, he returned to the main basement area and began searching for something to break the lock. After several minutes of rummaging, he found an old rusted crowbar. Back in the hallway, he set to work on the padlock, the metal protesting with every strike. Finally, with a sharp crack, the lock gave way. The steel door swung open, revealing a small, dimly lit room. At the center stood a large wooden crate. Danny approached it cautiously, the cold air biting at his skin. The crate was nailed shut, but the crowbar made quick work of the task. He pried the lid open and gasped. Inside the crate was a collection of old photographs and letters. They were yellowed with age, but as Danny sifted through them, he realized they told a disturbing story. The photos depicted children, all around his age, standing in front of various houses, looking solemn and afraid. The letters were written in his grandmother's handwriting, detailing the lives of these children and their eventual disappearance. A chill ran down Danny's spine as he recognized one of the houses in the photographs. It was his grandmother's house, and the boy in the photo, though younger, was unmistakably him. Danny's breath caught in his throat. Why had his grandmother been documenting these children, and why was he among them? The sound of footsteps echoed in the hallway behind him. Danny spun around, heart racing. The basement was supposed to be empty. He called out, but only silence answered. Gripping the crowbar tightly, he cautiously made his way back down the hallway, every nerve on edge. As he reached the entrance to the hallway, the light above flickered and went out, plunging him into darkness. Panic surged through him as he fumbled for his phone, using its weak light to guide his steps. The basement seemed even more labyrinthine in the dark, and he struggled to find his way. Just as he thought he was hopelessly lost, he saw a faint glow ahead. Relief washed over him as he hurried towards it, only to find the basement door shut and locked. He rattled a handle, but it wouldn't budge. Trapped, he felt a rising sense of dread. Something was very wrong with this house, and he was starting to realize he might not be alone. Danny's phone buzzed in his pocket, breaking the suffocating silence. He fished it out, grateful for the distraction. It was a text from an unknown number. His fingers trembled as he opened it. "Get out of there, Danny. Now." His heart pounded as he tried to process the message. Who could possibly know where he was? He typed back a quick reply. "Who is this?" The response was almost immediate. "No time. They know you're there. Get out before it's too late." A cold sweat broke out on Danny's forehead. He glanced around the basement, shadows dancing eerily in the dim light. The sense of being watched grew stronger. He had to find a way out. But how? The basement door was locked, and the windows were too small to squeeze through. His mind raced, trying to recall the layout of the house. There was a cellar door outside that might offer an escape route. He just needed to find it. Moving quickly, he retraced his steps through the basement, navigating the clutter and darkness with growing urgency. He reached the far wall, where he remembered seeing a small, half-hidden door earlier. The cellar door. Danny yanked it open, revealing a narrow staircase leading up to a metal hatch. He climbed the stairs two at a time, praying the hatch wasn't locked. With a grunt, he pushed against the metal. It resisted for a moment before giving way, the rusted hinges screeching in protest. Fresh air hit his face as he emerged outside, the night sky above a stark contrast to the oppressive darkness below. He scrambled out and slammed the hatch shut behind him, leaning against it as he caught his breath. His phone buzzed again, another message from the unknown number. Good. Now leave and never come back. Danny didn't need to be told twice. He sprinted to his car, parked a few yards away, and fumbled with the keys before finally getting the door open. He glanced back at the house one last time, its dark windows seeming to watch him. He shuddered, then started the engine and sped away. As he drove, his mind churned with questions. Who had sent those texts? What had his grandmother been involved in? And why was he on that list of children? He needed answers, but for now, getting as far away from that house as possible was his priority. He drove through the night, not stopping until he reached a small motel on the outskirts of the next town. Exhausted, he checked in and collapsed onto the bed, sleep claiming him almost instantly. The next morning, Danny awoke with a start. The events of the previous night rushed back, and he felt an urgent need to uncover the truth. He decided to start with his grandmother's lawyer, who had handled her estate. Maybe there were documents or records that could shed some light on the mystery. The lawyer, Mr. Thompson, was a portly man with a kind face. He seemed surprised to see Danny, but welcomed him into his office. "I'm sorry to bother you, Mr. Thompson, but I need to know more about my grandmother's past," Danny said, trying to keep the desperation out of his voice. Mr. Thompson nodded slowly. "I was wondering when you might come by. There are things you need to know, but I didn't want to overwhelm you so soon after her passing." He reached into his desk drawer and pulled out a thick file. "Your grandmother was a remarkable woman, Danny, but she had her secrets. This file contains information about her involvement with a group dedicated to helping children in difficult circumstances. However, it appears that something went wrong." Danny took the file, his hands shaking. Inside were more photos and letters, similar to those he had found in the basement. But these included official documents, detailing the group's activities and their mission to protect vulnerable children. As he read, a pattern emerged. The children were all from abusive or neglectful homes, taken in by the group to be cared for and given new identities. But the documents also hinted at a darker side. There were references to the committee and special assignments, with several children's fates marked as unknown. Danny's blood ran cold. His grandmother had been part of something much larger and more sinister than he had realized. Who were these people? And why did my grandmother keep this from me? He asked, looking up at Mr. Thompson. The committee was a shadowy organization, Mr. Thompson explained. They claimed to be protecting the children, but there were rumors of experiments and other unethical practices. Your grandmother likely kept it a secret to protect you. Danny's head spun. His grandmother had always been a kind, loving woman. How could she have been involved in something so terrible? As he left the lawyer's office, a new determination took hold. He needed to uncover the full truth and put an end to whatever the committee was doing. And to do that, he had to go back to the house, back to the basement, and face whatever horrors lay hidden there. Howard had never liked basements. He had grown up in an old Victorian house with a basement that always seemed to harbor shadows that crept just beyond the reach of the light. Now, at the age of 42, he found himself in another old house, this time inherited from his recently deceased uncle Theodore. The house was in a small, remote town, far from the hustle and bustle of Howard's usual city life. When he arrived, the house stood silent, its windows like dark eyes staring out over the overgrown yard. Howard had come to sort through his uncle's possessions, intending to stay only a few days. The first couple of days were uneventful. Howard spent his time sorting through dusty boxes, old photographs, and stacks of yellowed papers. It was tedious, but he felt a sense of obligation to uncover his uncle's past. On the third day, while rummaging through the study, Howard found a key hidden at the back of a desk drawer. It was heavy, with an ornate handle that suggested it was meant for something significant. Howard's curiosity piqued. He wandered through the house, trying the key in various locks, but none seemed to fit. He was about to give up when he remembered the basement. The door to the basement was located in the kitchen, behind a stack of old furniture. Howard cleared the way and inserted the key into the lock. It fit perfectly. He hesitated for a moment, feeling a familiar unease. With a deep breath, he turned the key and opened the door. The basement stairs creaked ominously as Howard descended, the air growing colder with each step. The single light bulb hanging from the ceiling barely illuminated the room, casting long, eerie shadows. The basement was larger than he expected, filled with old furniture, covered in dust and cobwebs. As he moved further into the room, Howard noticed a large wooden crate in the corner, its surface marked with strange symbols. Intrigued, he approached and saw that the crate was locked with a padlock. The key from the study drawer fit the padlock as well. With a click, the padlock opened. Howard lifted the lid of the crate and gasped. Inside, he found a collection of old, leather-bound journals. Each one was meticulously labeled with dates spanning several decades. Howard picked up the topmost journal and began to read. The journal entries were written in his uncle's handwriting. They started innocuously enough, with notes about daily life and mundane events. But as he read further, the tone began to change. His uncle wrote about strange noises coming from the basement, items moving on their own, and a growing sense of dread. One entry, dated 5 years ago, caught Howard's attention. "I hear them every night now, the whispers. They come from the basement. I've tried to ignore them, but they grow louder, more insistent. I don't know how much longer I can stand it. I fear I am losing my mind." Howard shivered, feeling a chill that had nothing to do with the cold air. He flipped through the pages, finding more entries detailing his uncle's descent into paranoia and fear. The last entry, dated just a week before his death, was short and frantic. "They're here. I can feel them watching me. I must do something before it's too late." Howard closed the journal, his heart pounding. He felt an overwhelming urge to leave the basement, but something compelled him to stay. He looked around, his eyes falling on an old cabinet in the far corner. The cabinet door was slightly ajar, revealing a faint glimmer of light inside. Howard approached the cabinet cautiously. As he opened the door, he found a small, hidden compartment at the back. Inside, there was a metal box, much smaller than the crate. He opened it and found a collection of old photographs and a letter addressed at him. With trembling hands, Howard opened the letter. It was from his uncle. "Howard, if you are reading this, then I am no longer alive. There are things in this house, in this basement, that you must understand. I'd have tried to uncover the truth, but I fear I have only scratched the surface. Be careful, my dear nephew. Trust no one. The answers lie within the journals, but they also lie within you. Be brave." Howard felt a surge of determination. He had to uncover the truth about what had driven his uncle to madness. But as he turned to leave the basement, the light bulb flickered and went out, plunging him into darkness. Howard stood frozen in the pitch-black basement, his breath coming in short, shallow gasps. His mind raced, replaying his uncle's frantic words. As his eyes adjusted to the darkness, he fumbled for his phone, using its flashlight to pierce the gloom. The beam of light cast eerie shadows on the walls, making the basement seem even more sinister. He knew he couldn't leave yet. There were too many unanswered questions, too many loose ends. Howard steeled himself and decided to examine the journals more closely. He picked up the journal he had been reading and flipped to the final pages. His uncle's handwriting was barely legible, the script jagged and erratic. "They come at night, whispering in a language I do not understand. I see their eyes in the dark, watching, waiting. I've sealed the door, but I know it won't hold them for long. If you find this, Howard, you must be prepared. They are not of this world. They feed on fear, on despair. Do not let them consume you." A sudden noise shattered the silence, making Howard jump. It sounded like a faint, shuffling movement coming from behind him. He turned the flashlight towards the source of the noise but saw nothing. His heart pounded as he forced himself to stay calm. He knew he had to be methodical if he wanted to uncover the truth. He picked up another journal, this one dated from 20 years ago. The entries revealed more about his uncle's research into the house's history. The house had once belonged to a reclusive scholar named Dr. Elias Carter, who had been obsessed with the occult and the supernatural. Dr. Carter had reportedly vanished under mysterious circumstances, leaving behind a legacy of fear and superstition. Howard found an entry that mentioned a hidden room in the basement, a place where Dr. Carter conducted his rituals. According to the journal, the room was concealed behind a false wall. Howard's flashlight scanned the basement walls until he noticed a section that seemed slightly different, the edges more defined, as if it had been recently disturbed. He approached the wall and began to tap lightly, listening for a hollow sound. After a few minutes, he found it. With some effort, he managed to pry open the concealed door, revealing a narrow passageway that led deeper into the earth. The air grew colder and more oppressive as he ventured into the passage. The walls were lined with ancient symbols and cryptic writings, their meanings lost to time. Howard felt a growing sense of unease but pressed on, driven by a need to understand what had tormented his uncle. At the end of the passage, he found a small chamber. In the center of the room was an altar, covered with more of the strange symbols. The air was thick with the scent of decay, and Howard's flashlight flickered, casting unstable shadows around the room. He noticed a large book on the altar, its cover adorned with an intricate design. Howard opened the book and began to read. It was Dr. Carter's journal, detailing his experiments and his descent into madness. The journal described rituals meant to summon entities from another realm, beings that thrived on human suffering. Dr. Carter had become obsessed with these entities, believing they held the key to ultimate knowledge and power. But the rituals had gone horribly wrong, unleashing malevolent forces that he could not control. The final entry in Dr. Carter's journal sent a chill down Howard's spine. "They are here. I have brought them into this world, and now they will not leave. They whisper to me, promising secrets, but I know they lie. They hunger for my soul. To whoever finds this, beware. Do not trust the whispers. Do not succumb to their lies. They will destroy you." As Howard absorbed the horrifying details, he felt a presence behind him. He turned slowly, the flashlight's beam catching a glimpse of movement. In the darkness, he saw eyes, countless eyes, watching him. The whispers began, faint at first, then growing louder, filling his mind with an overwhelming sense of dread. He backed away, the whispers becoming a cacophony in his head. He had to get out, had to escape before they consumed him. He stumbled back through the passage, the eyes following him, the whispers relentless. When he reached the basement, he slammed the concealed door shut and bolted up the stairs, locking the basement door behind him. Breathless, he collapsed in the kitchen, his heart racing. The whispers were gone, but the fear remained. Howard knew he couldn't stay in the house any longer. He grabbed his belongings and fled, leaving the cursed place behind. Days later, back in the safety of his city apartment, Howard tried to make sense of everything he had discovered. The journals, the hidden room, the entities, all of it seemed like a nightmare, but he knew it was real. Howard decided to write down everything he had experienced, hoping that one day, someone might find a way to put an end to the evil that haunted his family. But even as he wrote, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched, that the whispers were waiting, just beyond the edge of the light, ready to consume him if he let his guard down. The basement might be far away, but its darkness had followed him, a shadow he could never escape.